The reality with this legislation that has been drafted, that the government wants to take forward, is that it's not going to control conflicts of interest, it doesn't prohibit certain conduct, and it will not repeat the excesses of what we have seen in the past.
When you say certain conduct, can you be more specific?
I'll be very specific. If you pick up the Canadian legislation, it prohibits the so-called revolving door, that you leave government and then you get a job or a contract. It prohibits the eligibility of taking certain contracts and being entitled to apply for certain contracts while you are related to a government minister, or you have close political contacts with government ministers. This is the stuff that we've been talking about in the GSD. This is not new. The stuff that we've been talking about in the GSD for many, many years. It so happens that this has become now an Openshaw recommendation. But what this law that the government has produced does is pays entire lip service to the Openshaw recommendation without actually meeting the real issue, which is how do you control conflicts of interest? How do you avoid things happening again? I mean, let me give you a very good example. 36 North, which is the company within which the Chief Minister had ultimate beneficial interest, vying for a government contract. That is completely unacceptable. Would this law prohibit that in future? The answer is no, because it's a toothless monster of bureaucracy where there are no clear prohibitions. If we had the Canadian legislation, all the controls that the GSD has been advocating for many years, it would precisely prevent that stuff happening. Awards to contracts of people who are related to ministers or who are in the government party, those are the things that we've been talking about for many, many years, that this law will not prevent, because this law is what the government always do.
Well, the government said that they looked at the Canadian law and it wasn't appropriate. Would you agree with that?
Well, is it inappropriate or inconvenient? Because look, you're creating this massive bureaucracy of rules, regulations, guidance that doesn't take you anywhere and doesn't tell you what the prohibitions are for 40,000 people, and yet in Canada you can have a law that precisely prohibits certain things for 40 million people. Are we really saying that it's so difficult to create those prohibitions, or is it that actually it's not inappropriate, but it's inconvenient? Because if we created those prohibitions, things that are happening today in terms of the awards or eligibility of contracts, or indeed on any other conflicts of interest that are not properly navigated, would continue to happen again.
Is it completely toothless? Are there any parts of the bill that you do support?
Look, half of the bill, there's 46 sections, half of the bill, 23 sections, are about creating further regulations, rules, guidance, or arrangements. It's about drowning you in further layers of bureaucracy without telling you what the prohibitions actually are. If you pick up the Canadian law, it's very precise. Why aren't those prohibitions in this law? Why is it so difficult? Or is it, in fact, that the government are unwilling to legislate to control conflicts of interest?
And what do you make about the issue that the Chief Minister has the power to exclude public bodies from this bill, such as regulators?
There are many, many things that could be said about this law if we were to slice and dice different segments. And one of the big issues for me is that it is not obvious that this law catches government-owned companies, for example, whereas it's very clear that the Canadian legislation does talk about crown corporations, in other words, companies where the Canadian government has interest. This law in Gibraltar doesn't appear to do that, so there is a mechanism there. It looks like there's a big hole where you can sidestep certain issues on conflicts of interest. What we think is, and we've been saying it for many, many years, that you need to have robust controls on conflicts of interest. And that's not just about principles. It's about real prohibitions. It's not about taking reasonable steps to prevent conflicts of interest. It's about prohibiting those conflicts of interest. And it's about extending it beyond what this draft law does, which is toothless and a bureaucracy, into real effects. And the real effects are about controlling financial transactions that the government are involved in and the conflicts that are underlying those financial transactions.